Let me be real, I hate the whole New Year, New Me hype. January is usually cold, draining, and honestly, the worst time to try to change anything in your life. Yet every year, we are guilted into forcing habits, setting crazy goals, and pretending we are failing if we don't hit them. In today's episode, I'm breaking down why New Year's resolutions actually suck the hell out of your life, where they even came from, and how you can create real change that sticks without any shame, pressure, and without burning yourself out. So, if you're tired of the fake motivation and want a smarter kind of way to grow, you're going to love today's episode. And I promise to God, this will not be a boring resolutions New Year's kind of podcast. It will be worth you tuning in. And without further ado, let's get into it. Today I want to share something with you that I felt helped me so much to set myself up for success this year. And I'm recording this podcast shortly before Christmas, and I think this is now the time also where a lot of you, including myself, are thinking, what are we wanting out of this new year? 2026 is around the corner. And before you feel like, oh my God, this is another boring episode about New Year's resolutions or a better me or a new year, new me version or how to set better goals, it is definitely not, because honestly, I hate this whole game with, setting up goals in the new year, and especially when it is around January. I feel January is definitely not the month to be, to form new habits. It's not the month where most people have a lot of excitement, a lot of motivation, a lot of willpower. I feel January for me is the month where I'm actually resetting myself, where I am actually going in a kind of hibernation. It's where I'm slowing down the most. Because think about it, December is so busy for most of us. How it is for you? I mean, it might be something like where you are, buying Christmas presents, where you're just busy to prepare for Christmas. You might have guests over, you have to pay to buy presents, gifts, and it's a lot of food and so on and so forth. And it is also for a lot of people in their jobs the most busy season or quarter or month of the entire year. So then comes the holidays, people are kind of slowing down. And then comes the new year, like with a big bang, because in a lot of countries there is fireworks involved and another party, alcohol maybe for some, or at least another feast of good food, friends over, family over, or going somewhere on vacation, as some will do. And then what happens is January starts, and that's where we should all be like disciplined, going back to our routines, or maybe start a new habit, new goals, being just a better version of you. It just doesn't work. And I'm like, why are we even doing this? So as I got older, I had that inclination that January is the month where I feel the most exhausting. And do you know how much shame I had? Because everyone is like, yeah, I'm now doing this now, and oh no, I'm doing that. Someone is building a business or starting a new offer in the business or new product. Other people going out to the gym and are really fit, and they are right. I don't know, like whatever it is, everyone has this kind of, for me, artificial energy of like, oh, now I'm going to be the better version of me and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, why January? And I was also asking ChatGPT, where does this new year and these resolutions actually come from? Because I was always like interested in, where is this coming from? Who told me, or who tells me that January needs to be the new year? And let me tell you, the new year wasn't always in January, and it was certainly not about self-improvement, as you might pretty well have guessed that. So ChatGPT the ChatGPT told me that the earliest known New Year celebrations go back like 4,000 years to ancient Babylon. And their New Year happened not in January, but obviously in March. And you might already guess it. It is tied to agriculture because spring, what is spring about? Spring is to plant seeds. It's a very fertile season and it's about renewal. So back then, when people prayed to different gods, obviously they made promises to their respective gods to repay debts or return, borrowed items. So obviously resolutions weren't about becoming your best self. I mean, oh gosh, already that triggers me so bad. But it was more about restoring order and starting on a clean slate in a very natural growth season, because most of the global hemisphere, let's say March comes April, is where everything starts to sprout, to blossom. So obviously that was the most fertile season. And not January, because again, January for most, not for me here in Florida, because Florida obviously is very lush, it's very green, it's very warm throughout the whole year. So January is perfect. But obviously when I still lived in Boston or even like in California, January was colder, cold, or it was gray. So, and then I was interested in like, okay, then now we know that the new year originally started many years ago, back in March. So, and then it's about where this January comes from. Like there must be an origin. So if you're not interested in this kind of history, you can just press the forward button on your podcast app or device, because I just want to dive into this very briefly. So I'll keep myself short here, obviously, because we're not here on a history journey. But I thought, because I'm naturally interested in this thing, to also not skip that part and fill you in here too, because I think maybe you want to know more about that. So January comes from a Roman god named Janus. And Janus was a Roman god who had two faces. Interestingly, one was looking backward and one was looking forward. And the Romans moved the new year forward to January instead of March. And that was only for administrative and political reasons. It wasn't biological, like as we discussed before with the Babylonians, who used the new season in March for planting things. And it was certainly not for psychological reasons either, as we do it now with all this new year, new me kind of bullshit. So it was more about tax cycles, because I said administrative and political reasons. So you might ask, okay, what does that mean? So it was more about tax cycles. It was about governance and military organizations back for the Romans. It was definitely not about human energy, motivation, or any kind of behavior change, because back then people were more in survival than we are nowadays. So January as a fresh start is a calendar decision, not a human one. So they used January for those certain reasons that I told you about. And the resolutions were moral contracts and not about self-improvement. So in Roman and later Christian traditions, New Year promises were all about moral behavior. It was about repentance, about like regretting things that you've done and then promising to maybe your God that you would do better. And it was also about correcting, obviously, the wrongdoing, as I just said. So it was, I'll be a better person in the eyes of my God. And it was not certainly about, I will optimize my habits and become unstoppable in the new year. And this moral undertone still lingers. And that is also why a lot of New Year's resolutions just fail, because they come with shame instead of curiosity. And now back to the 20th century, this New Year's resolutions are a marketing invention. What we now call a New Year's resolution is about fitness goals, productivity, transformation. And that really exploded, especially in the last few years. And you know what? And you know why? Not so much about what, but you know why? And I think you might already have a hunch. It's about consumer culture, to be a better consumer, to consume more, to buy more. And it's also about, like people pump out their products or their, let's say, gym membership or diet programs, or maybe a new supplement, new planners, new apps, you kind of name it. So what January actually became is not a human reset, a commercial one. And that is why I'm so rebelling against all this New Year thing. And if I hear someone talking about the New Year, New Me thing, oh my God, I cannot help myself but really think like, I'm so sorry that you have not yet discovered that you got manipulated, that you're getting more and more manipulated to buy more and to consume more. And I am not someone that I can take myself out of this equation, because obviously I am also like, buying things that actually afterwards I'm feeling like, why did I even buy it? I mean, the new supplements. I am so like guilty of all those things. That's why I'm now telling you what this whole new year actually is about. It's never about you becoming about your growth, of becoming the better version that you are already. You are already an amazing human being, but we all strive for growth. We all want to become better. And I don't say that from a sense of like, oh, I'm not good enough and I am, I beat myself towards change. No. But on the Maslow's hierarchy, self-actualization and self-growth is the highest thing that you can achieve. And, we all want to have a meaningful life. And for a meaningful life, it's also about us getting into the equation of, I want to do something that is, where I can be a kinder person, where I'm contributing towards someone in my inner circle, I'm contributing towards my family, or, towards society, whatever it is. So coming back to this whole New Year's resolution thing, this is what it's all about. And the whole message kind of is, you are not enough, but you could be more if you would start now, if you're buying this product. And that is what this whole new year has become. And that pressure, that is learned and it's not natural. So obviously, we all go to the end of the year and we hear from other people, oh, next year or in the new year, I'm doing this. I want to become better, whatever it is. And it builds shame, it builds guilt, because then we reflect back on 2025 and we feel like, oh my God, I haven't done this, I haven't accomplished that, I'm still where I am last year. And I'm still today where I was last year, so I have to say that this way. And that is so much pressure, so much like negative emotions stirring up. And the shame cycle is definitely a cycle that keeps you from the real change. And here are the key insights. Most people never really hear, and maybe you are familiar about that, because I know you're listening to this podcast. You are a very smart, a very educated person, and you're pretty much interested in becoming a more grown and better version tomorrow. So humans, as you might have already noticed within yourself, are seasonal beings. We are cyclical, especially as women, right? We are having 28 days plus minus, even if you're already in perimenopause or in menopause, we are still cyclical beings. And behavior change works best in expansion phases, because there are phases in the year where we need to rejuvenate, where we need to rest. And for me personally, and I'm curious to hear how you feel about it, for me, the rejuvenation, the resting phase starts in January. That's when I make a big exhale. And it's not so much that I'm reflecting them back on this year, 2025, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did this, or I could have done this. But it's about like, I just don't want to hear any of it. I just want to I just want to exhale. I just want to rest, because it is we are detoxing from all the alcohol, from all the unhealthy cookies, food, from the sugar, from, being maybe out of our routines, out of our usual patterns. We are, we had family over, or we were visiting, or maybe you were traveling over New Year's Eve and Christmas, whatever it is. But coming back then to your work, or coming back to your routine, means you kind of need to reset your body and also your brain in a way. So, and then you also should, start with whatever your goal is. Maybe it's a health goal where you said you want to eat more protein and less carbs. Do you know what that means for your brain? It is definitely something where your brain will feel like change is coming. And your brain doesn't like change. It hates change. Because change means more energy needs to be applied for you to eat more protein and eat less carbs. And our brains are very efficient and they want to save energy as much as they can. But then change means, there are new situations and the brain has to build new neurons, new neuronal pathways. And that is energy draining. And then you already drained from the year, maybe because Christmas was exceptionally busy, or whatever it is. I mean, I talk to my clients, they are more exhausted than ever, be it because they are a stay-at-home mom, or because they are teachers, or they are in corporate America, or whatever, in a corporation, and everyone is busy. No one says it's the calmest month of the year. It's usually the most crazy, and there are Christmas parties, and there are events, and a lot of alcohol for some. Maybe not for you, but for some it is more alcohol or more carb on sugar retreats. And then you should actually make changes. Doesn't really work. And your nervous system is wired for slowing down in winter. I mean, even here in Florida, where I have like warm temperatures, and obviously, you can go swimming all year round, I even notice that the weather has changed. It's a tiny bit colder, it's windier, it's, less, like, I mean, when the sun is shining, it's still warm, don't get me wrong, but it's still, we have more cloudier days than we had. And I even notice here my body really craves to slow down. So whether I'm in cold Boston, or in more moderate California, or in evergreen Florida, where it's always exotic and always hot, warm temperatures, I still feel the change. It hasn't changed for me. Especially, in your brain, it's end of the year. So your nervous system is wired for slowing down, for conserving the energy and reflecting and not reinventing yourself. And what we also always forget is that our ancestry is so ingrained in our DNA, in all our cells, in our nervous system. So we are actually, my grandparents definitely not been the busiest or the most, excited about January to better themselves. They actually slowed down the most because, they had all the kids, the grandkids over, and they cooked, they built, they put up the tree, like all, what I mean, everything that I talked about before. And they have been like the ones that slowed down there. So maybe you also noticed that from your own grandparents, that they were definitely not the ones who fell into this whole marketing trap, because it didn't exist back then. It was more about survival. And then when we demand in a month where we should actually reset and slow down, but we demand from ourselves like maximum discipline, motivation, identity change, in the darkest, coldest, and most depleted part of the year, I already can smell the resistance my brain will build up in my skull. And that is not because I am weak or you're weak, but it's because we are humans and we still run on our ancestry code. Our nervous system has not changed. Our brain structures have not changed at all, okay? And now I have been talking quite a bit about, the new year, why it was originally in a different month or a different season. what it was its original intention, then how the Romans shifted it to January from and named it after Janus, who had these two heads, one looking backward, one looking forward, and that was then kind of like, looking backwards of the previous years, forward to the next year. And then, I talked to you how the 20th century hijacked then the new year from coming back to, oh, I want to be a better person, to actually a marketing trap of, buy this, do this, and, tune into this membership, and really hijacked it to be a commercial thing where we are just paying for something that promises the world and under delivers. And now I want to shift the conversation to the juiciest part. So if you stayed that long in that episode, now we're going to the juice. Because, again, my new year does not start in January. It also doesn't start in December. I have intentionally put it to a different month of the year. And that is no other than August. So for all the reasons that I talked to you about before, I certainly don't believe January is a good time to, under quotation mark, quote unquote, reinvent your life. And it's, and I'm not telling you this because I'm trying to be edgy or different for the sake of it. I have just, let's start how I went into this whole thing. So when it was August this year, I got a hunch. I was like, oh, we are in the 8th month of the year, and I have still 4 months ahead of me. And then I was thinking, what about if I'm now starting to reassess how my first 8 months have been, and then everything that I kind of wanted to accomplish and haven't yet accomplished, I will have still 4 months to lean fully into. Because I know once October or November hits, we feel that the new year or the end of the year is drawing closer, and then we are getting more nervous or feel like, okay, it's never mind. I will start in January. It's already like I don't have time to do anything, like cannot do any reflections, or it's anyway too late to do any changes, and I don't want to. So, all those things. So I felt 4 months is enough for me to build habits, to build a healthy foundation, so that when January comes, I don't have to set a reset button. I mean, I will naturally slow down, of course, but I'm slowing down with good habits. I'm slowing down with habits that will help me to get where I want to be. And I'm not starting in January, I'm starting in August. So in August, I reflected how this year has been. And it was really a good year, I have to say. It was definitely something where I said, wow, I have done a few things, but there were also a few things that I have kind of fell off a little bit, that especially, naming this podcast. I've been on a hiatus from April. I stopped recording podcasts late April. And I think I started in October, if I'm not mistaken, with my podcasts. Please don't quote me on that, but I think it was October. Or maybe early November. So in August, I was like, I want to bring back my podcast and I want to speak off the cuff. I don't want to have scripts. And I also want to have I want to grow this podcast and become a better podcast host, and also I want to speak better and not going off a tangent. So I was already having like that intention of all those things I just mentioned. I use now the podcast as one example. There were other examples as well, but I think the podcast one was the one that I was like, I really love recording podcasts and publishing them. And I feel like it's a format that has so much potential, and it's not a trend. Podcast has been there for the last 10, 15 years, and it's growing and growing. And I'm a big podcast lover. I have mine that I really truly love, and I learn a lot. So I was like, okay, you can only get better if you do it. So while I know some of my previous podcasts might have sucked, might not have the best quality in terms of recording or of the way I was talking, I can only become better if I continuously do it. Okay, so I thought, good, I have still 4 months to start recording podcasts. I have still enough time to throw out a couple of new episodes. And that was so much motivation because I wasn't pushing it to January. And again, January comes right after very emotional holidays because even though it's a very festive period for some of you, or for maybe you are one of them, it also is a very emotional time because you might miss parents or loved ones. It might be where you might have lost someone and it's the first Christmas without them. As I said before, too much sugar, alcohol, food, disrupted routines, and social overload. So then obviously, as I said before, and I know I'm very repetitive, in January you are drained. So in August, I have still enough time to ask myself what actually worked this year and what didn't. And I ask myself also the question, what am I most proud of? And what maybe have I been quietly tolerating? Maybe it was something where I was indulging in too much chocolate, or into something where I'm like, oh, I could do way, way better. And I want to be really clear about something. I never do this from self-judgment. So when I reflect in August of my, I've reflected over my past 8 months, I don't do this from any self-judgment. If you are going about it with judgment, where you shame or guilt yourself into what you have done or not done, obviously that will not help at all. I do it solely from self-respect because, again, August, I still have a ton of time. I have time to adjust. I have time to experiment. So, because what usually happens when we say we want to change something or we set a goal and then we go about it in January, we have not tested it. So you don't know if it's actually for you. Because very often, let's say you want to do, let's say podcasts. Let's stick with that example. Maybe you want to record podcasts. You've never done it. You don't know if you like it. And what I sometimes did in the past was like, okay, let's test it out for at least 3 months. And then I can honestly say whether I enjoyed it or if it's something that is just not where I see my potential in. And August, you can test it out and then can say in November or December, you know what, podcasting is not for me. I don't want to continue doing it. Perfect. Okay, so you leave it behind, but at least you have experienced it, you have done it, and you know it's not for you. So, and it's also time when back in August, you have time to build something before the whole pressure of a whole new year kicks in, because no one in August talks about changes. It talks about resolutions or intention, goal setting. No one. So I feel obviously already so much ahead of everyone else because I'm kind of putting thoughts into, what I want to change, what I want to still implement, what I want to let go of, while everyone is still in the hamster wheel. And I just want to tell you that quickly, that where goal setting actually goes wrong is in the whole obsession over outcomes. And these outcomes can be like more money. Maybe you want to be financially savvy, you want to save more money. Or you want better health. You want to eat more protein. You want to work out more. You just want to, I don't know, whatever it is, whatever you define with better health. Could also be weight loss. Or you say that I want to become more confident because I noticed when I'm presenting, I'm still wobbly. I still have a lot of, negative self-talk. And I want to be more a confident presenter. And here's the thing. And this is also backed by psychology and behavioral science. Outcomes are just the symptoms. So the obsession over outcomes are the symptoms. They are effects. The cause is not your outcomes, obviously. The cause is always your behavior, your habits, and your patterns. And the thing is, what do you do on a, let's say, random Tuesday when no one is watching? That is actually where you can find the behaviors, your habits, your patterns, and this is what puts out the effects. And success is not the result, it's the cause. So if you want to have more money, a better health, or a higher confidence, those are downstream effects of how you live. As I said before, what do you do on a random Tuesday when no one is watching? So obviously, when you set goals like, I want to be successful, I want to feel better, I want to be disciplined. I mean, these are very superficial kind of intentions, because I want to be successful. I would have to ask you, how do you define success? And how do you know that you are successful? Or I want to feel better. What does it mean? You want to feel less sad? You need to be more going in depth here, but I just, for simplicity, I'm just staying a little bit more superficial here. So obviously, I want to be disciplined or more disciplined. But if you never change the inputs, you are basically hoping for a different ending while you're playing the same movie over and over again. So how should the end change? And then when I realized this year, if I start in late summer, this changes my whole trajectory. There is no hype that I have to buy into. There's no marketing that I fall prey, because I'm obviously also a marketing prey. And I love good marketing, and I know how I'm like opening my wallet if someone promises me the world and has fancy marketing. I am such a, oh my God. So when I say that you got manipulated, I'm talking from my own experience, because I am constantly manipulated by good marketing. Anyway, in August, there's less fantasy motivation. There is just more honesty, I feel, and I can pressure test my habits. And I can ask myself, does this actually support my life, or does it just look good on paper? Let's say a good habit, for example, or is this like sustainable, or am I forcing myself again? Because, my God, in the past, I've been so forcing myself for everything. And obviously, the sustainability behind forcing yourself to do something is almost zero. And neuroscience says that habits stick when they are tied to identity and safety, not pressure, and for sure not punishment. So safety is so important if you want to change something. So if there's negative self-talk or you feel a hint of pressure, I can already tell you that habits won't stick, because your brain will resist. So August energy is quieter, it's more grounded, it's less performative, because let's be honest, often in January we are so performative. We're like trying to be someone that we are not, because we haven't set the groundwork or the baseline for it. So for the last 4 months, I have kind of gained real data and not delusion, because obviously I think this is my 4th or 5th podcast episode that I've published, and I've definitely become way better than when I started again podcasting. So I have to say I will stick obviously with my podcast, and I have already formed the habit that once a week I am recording a podcast. Whether I feel I am super prepared and have everything together, or where I'm like, I don't know if this is a good podcast topic. I don't care anymore. I'm just like talking off the cuff and want you to understand. Like, I want to bring closer to you more personal stories of mine. And I also want to inform you of things that I feel have benefited me. And obviously, some of the things might stick, and some of them be more resonant to you than others. But I feel when I kind of decoded something that made me more successful, that made me a better, kinder, more beautiful person overall, why do I have to gatekeep that? That will not make me a good person, right? And also, before we wrap up, because there is so much that I could, get into, I want to go into a few tips I want to leave here for you. So even if, because obviously August happened a couple of weeks ago, even if you start fresh in January because you feel like, whatever I just told you, it doesn't resonate for you, January is still the month where you are the opposite of resting. I just want to go into how you can, I want to give you some tips that I think are helping you for the remaining 2 weeks, and then also for the next 52 weeks in 2026. The first tip I want to tell you is build habits at 70% effort and not 100%. I'm pretty sure you have heard and maybe have been conditioned or taught that if something matters to you, you should go all in. If you open YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok, or whatever, wherever you are on, people talk about that you have to go all in, all the effort, all the discipline, all the freaking time. But let me tell you, your brain doesn't actually learn through intensity. It learns through repetition that feels safe. So when success is easy, the nervous system relaxes. And when it relaxes, the brain says, oh, we can do this actually again. It actually felt good. And that's when habits stick. So instead of, let's say, if you have a health goal of working out every week, instead of saying I'm going to work out 5 times a week, no matter what, if you say I'm going to move my body in a way that feels supportive and that I can manage 3 times a week, well, that's the 70% effort that will help you stick to the goal. And 70% effort instead of the 100% doesn't mean you don't care, or doesn't mean you can't accomplish 100%. But it means you are playing the long game. And you have to think about sustainability when you want to change something within you, or you want to build on new patterns or new habits. And consistency also rewires your identity. So if you play the long game, if you put the 70% of effort instead of the 100%, you're also more likely to be consistent. And the consistency rewires your identity. And instead of you having an identity of like, oh, I hate working out and I have a hard time going to the gym, you go 3 times a week, and maybe you're not going to the gym, maybe you're going to a yoga class, and maybe you have found a community there or a teacher that you really like. Then you are being consistent, and then you are becoming someone who moves their body and you feel good about it. And don't forget, intensity burns a lot of energy and fuel within you, and that's where you are falling off or more likely to fall off. The next tip I want to give you is support your nervous system first and not the ambition. We all have, and I'm pretty sure you know your part that is very ambitious. And I know when you listen to this podcast, you are a very, very focused and ambitious person. But before you ask yourself to change anything, ask this instead. Is your current nervous system, or is my nervous system, regulated enough to hold this? Because an overwhelmed brain doesn't build habits, it seeks relief, and it's in a survival pattern. If your system is dysregulated, every goal turns into another survival. It's kind of the saber-toothed tiger that's waiting to eat you. So a goal becomes the enemy. And then you start to rebel against yourself. Because obviously, you don't want to be in survival. You want to thrive. It's the opposite of being in a survival loop. So supporting your brain can be surprisingly simple. It can be, for example, morning sunlight for the first 10 to 20 minutes to tell your brain that it's time to wake up, and it stabilizes your hormonal cycle. Eat protein early in the day because that stabilizes blood sugar, which obviously affects your focus and emotional regulation. Walking, don't forget, that isn't exercise. It improves your executive function and decision making of your brain. And the last thing that I'm such a fan of is consistency matters more than anything else. So same bedtime, same wake up as often as possible. And I just want to name it. This is not about optimization. It's about creating the baseline within yourself where change does not feel like a daily threat. Because your system feels that the goals that you set up in your mind, being that tiger or that bear that lingers around the corner, just ready to eat you. And a regulated brain and nervous system is a better decision-making system. And because wait a sec. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I was just distracted for a second. So make sure that your nervous system is supported first and not the ambition first, because ambition is nice to have, but then obviously you will fail along the way if you're constantly in survival. And then also, attach habits to identity and not a future fantasy. So a lot of change fails because it lives in the future. And the future is something that is not existing. It's in your head. So when you say, when I finally feel confident or when I finally become more disciplined, these are all these future fantasies. But the brain does not respond to someday. It responds to who you believe you are right now, here and right now. So instead of asking, what should I do to become better? Ask yourself, what would a self-respecting version of me today do in this exact situation? And it doesn't have to be perfect, and it's not the most impressive, but it's honest. And identity-based habits, they stick because they feel congruent to you. And you're not forcing yourself to change. You are acting in alignment with who you are becoming. And 2 more tips before we wrap up, and then you managed through this podcast. Track efforts and not outcomes. Outcomes are very slow. They can take long. You know how long it sometimes takes to get the results that you want? It can be years. And your brains are not patient. If you only track results, you feel like you are failing long before anything has time to grow. And I know that from experience. Building a business, you're waiting for results and you think results are coming, and then they don't show for years. And same with the podcast. I mean, come on. I have every week people tuning in, between 5 and 10 people like download my podcast episode. That can feel immensely slow. Like what, 5 to 10 people? But that is a lot. And I know that in 2 or 3 years, if I'm being consistent, the 5 to 10 people might be 500 to 1,000, or maybe 5,000 to 10,000. Who fucking knows? And the problem here is that your brain needs the evidence. It needs the proof that you can trust yourself, that you know what you're doing. So instead of tracking, for example, the downloads of my weekly podcast, the money in the account, in your savings account, track things like, I showed up every week and recorded a podcast episode. Or I showed up when I didn't feel like it. Do you know how often I record a podcast episode and it's not the best day of my life? But if I would wait for this, well, I would not have a podcast episode for you today. You can also track things like, I kept a promise to myself, or as I kept a commitment, or I stopped before I burn out. So each one is a deposit into self-trust and respect. And self-trust is obviously the foundation of discipline. It's not willpower, not pressure, not punishment. It's your self-trust. It's how much you trust yourself in what you're doing. And the last tip, very, very important too, is do less before you do more. So this is adding by subtraction. And I think I need to do a podcast episode just about this next year, because it's such a beautiful principle that I live by. So it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's powerful. So before you add another habit, ask yourself, what would my future self thank me for today that I would do less of? Less, for example, over committing to prove you're capable, less of explaining yourself when you want to say no, or pushing through exhaustion and calling it strength, or, all those things. So your brain is constantly carrying load. And when you reduce that load, you create clarity. And clarity is when better choices come forward. And you don't always need more discipline. Sometimes you just need more space, and the brain thrives in space. So make more space before you create new habits or rewire your patterns. And here's what I want to leave you with. Change is not about January. It's obviously not about burning yourself out. It's not about forcing yourself into someone else's timeline. It's about listening to your own rhythm, respecting where you are in your nervous system, and quietly building the life you actually want. And I know August already, kind of has passed, and now you might want to start with January, but also think about if you don't want to use January for rejuvenating, for grounding yourself back into good, healthy habits in a very slow way, and then use February or March for starting the kind of where like you hit press and you are implementing those things that you have reflecting upon in January. I want you to listen about your own rhythm. I want you to respect your nervous system when you listen to your own rhythm. And I want you to start small. Start gentle. There is no rush, there is no force. Don't buy into timelines, into marketing propaganda. Just start with your body. Give it first what it needs. As we said before, a grounded, healthy nervous system before your ambition. And start earlier than you think you need to. Give yourself the permission to do just less. Take things off your plate and allow yourself to be human, to fail and build on the data of the failure and know that, wow, okay, this didn't work, so maybe we'll try it this way. And also trust that consistency always beats any intensity every single time, every single year. And because every time you show up for yourself, even just a little, even those micro changes, the small things you do every day. Maybe you wake up 10 minutes earlier than you used to. This 10 minutes changes everything in the future because it's sustainable. If you are someone who says, I don't want to sleep in, I want to wake up earlier so I can start like maybe, my movement, my fitness early before my job starts, that 10 minutes is easy to attain and it's sustainable, which is amazing, and it brings in consistency because you can wake up 10 minutes early. But an hour earlier, this is this 100% effort. Do the 70%. Don't forget about this. I feel like this is such a great tip and rule, and it had really changed the trajectory of my life. And over time, those small micro changes turn into really powerful future habits. And habits, as you know, turn into identity. And identity, that's where also real change lives. So, yeah, don't wait for the perfect moment. Start now, start small, start in August next year, whatever you do. But start with a grounded nervous system in your own time, on your own terms. And that's how the real new year happens. And trust me, it's one you actually want to show up for. Alrighty, so that has been a mouthful. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope there was something for you that sparked maybe some creative thoughts, maybe also some inspiration. And again, if this episode gave you even one spark of clarity, one little nudge to start honoring yourself earlier, I'd love for you to share it, either with a friend who also maybe needs to hear a different take on all the new year changes. And of course, if you want more tips or, real honest talk, make sure you're following this podcast so you don't miss what's coming next, because I am definitely going to be consistent. And remember, you don't have to wait for January. You don't have to wait for permission. You can start now on your own terms, in your own time. And now it's time to say goodbye. Until next time, my love, I'll see you next week. And I wish you all the best. Till then, bye.